Some exciting news in the Canadian Premier League. A new team was announced. And gentlemen, it is in the province of Quebec. FC Supra Du Québec is the official name of the CPL team that will launch in 2026. Ollie, how important is it for this market to have this team there, and also just the health and growth of the league?
Yeah, it's obviously a huge moment for the CPL and obviously for soccer in Quebec as well. And, we've been talking about this for years. When you ask anyone, any pundit, every commissioner that's been through this league, where do we need to be? Where do we need a new club? It's always Quebec is the first answer. And it's the most important one that this league has been trying to accomplish. So to see it finally happen is brilliant. But it's not just about doing it. I don't think it's about how you do it. And that was what really stood out to me as the club was unveiled last night, was just kind of the whole event, the number of people there, the identity of the club that was obviously unveiled that we'll talk about. Hearing from the people who spoke, Rocco Placentino, the new ownership group, James Johnson, obviously on behalf of the league. Like, I think in terms of new clubs coming into the Canadian Premier League, that was by far the biggest event, the most significant event we've had. And just watching it, I felt like this is a step up. Like, this is a watershed moment for the CPL in terms of what this league is about and its stature and status. So, really special to see it. And now, obviously, the hard work begins, and there's a lot to do on the pitch, in the stands, in the community, and they've got plenty in front of them. But to see it finally happen, and to see it happen the way it did, and the excitement around it is brilliant.
Yeah, I think that's it. There's a certain grandeur about the whole event and the process of it. Just even seeing some of the Montreal legends, when you see Mauro Biello popping up on the TV, that was pretty cool. Nick DeSantis. Like, side note, it was also like cool. I mean, we'll get to the branding, but it was cool to see former super players, right? It kind of gives you an idea of, okay, what they're stepping into. This is a historic market that is, that soccer has existed before even, CF Montreal and the Montreal Impact, and the idea that they're, going into this market where there's so much history. And I think that's just the idea of why going to Quebec in general is so special, is that this is a province that loves the sport, yet there's been this hole in the league that there hasn't been a team that's, that stretches to the Maritimes. It's just there in Ottawa right next door, but it's not actually in Quebec proper. To rectify this feels like it's going to be a big deal, because like you could see it as well in the announcement, like people there are begging for something of their own, and you can just see the way they stepped up and embraced it already. Like, they had ultras at the announcement already, throwing off smoke and then chanting. Gives you an idea of, okay, this is going to mean a lot to the province, and that's half the battle. And of course, it helps that they're going to be talented. There's going to be a lot of kids sitting there dreaming of, I really want to play for the Supra one day, and potentially, really wear that Quebec flag metaphorically, on their chest, because there's obviously a lot of pride in that province for the province and for the sport itself, especially.
It was an occasion. I think there were around 500 people there. It felt like this big, proper announcement, because it was. A lot of fans have been waiting for this, Ollie. I mean, I think, ever since we've started covering the CPL in 2019, immediately people kept saying, when are we going to get a team in Quebec? And I mean, there's a lot that we could go into here, and, CF Montreal kind of owning that space, and how it's a little bit more difficult to get a men's pro team in there. I mean, obviously League One Quebec exists. And then when the Northern Super League launched this year, the women were able to have a team there, but we knew it wasn't going to be that easy for a men's team. They're going to be out of Laval. But how did we even get here? Finally get to this point where the fans are getting what they want, which is a men's team as well in this province.
Well, now you do it and you see that event, like, it feels like a no-brainer, right? And it kind of did feel like a no-brainer for a long time. But I think, sometimes it takes a new person and maybe an outside person coming in to really accelerate it and say, like, guys, we've got to get this done. Like, perfection doesn't have to be the enemy of progress here. And I think that's what's happened with James Johnson. Like, there's been a lot of talk about this team and a potential new club in Quebec for a long time. But it's always been, can we find the right ownership group? Can we find the right facility? Like, there's always been dwelling on those things to make sure you do it right, which is totally well-intentioned. And I think maybe some of those things have accelerated. Obviously, a great ownership group seems to have sprung up. Obviously, the option of playing at Stade Boreal, where the Roses have kind of laid down roots now, that makes sense. So a lot of these things have developed over time, but I do think there was a little bit of an element of just pushing to do it, right? from the new leadership that's there at the CPL that has made a big difference here.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about this process, AGR, and just how it finally happened and somebody also just finally stood up and said, we're going to do it?
Yeah, I think it's huge. And what I like is that when you look at, some of the people involved in the project, and I'd really look at like Rocco Placentino in particular, like they're going into this with an idea of what needs to be done and what's there. Like, I just love that, he's not dropping in from an outside market or any of the sorts. This is a guy who's been in Quebec helping build a project. Like, he has his handprints all over a very successful CS Saint Laurent project that have accomplished things that, a lot of pro clubs would be proud of, developing multiple players for the national team, for making a cup run domestically last year, for being a factory to produce talent. I think it's special that there's, someone like that helming the project that has a connection to what needs to be done. He understands the development of the project. So I think that's also really important, that it can be tough sometimes because it's not easy to make, a team like this to start it. And sometimes there's always going to be outside help, outside investments. But there really felt like there was a local presence with the announcement, and, the fact that Placentino and other people that are involved have local stakes that I think will help the club massively in the short term.
All right, well, let's have some fun. What do you guys think of the colors and the logo? I mean, I never really make comments about this. I like it. I'm like, it's great. It's fine. It's love. It's good. Although I will say right away when I saw the S, my mind went two ways, right? Obviously it went Superman, and it also went like House of Slytherin in Harry Potter. A little kind of, yeah. So I kind of thought that. But other than that, I'm not the one to maybe even comment on this, because I think everything's fine until it's not. I'll say if it's not, but I don't mind it, Ollie. How are you feeling?
I like it a lot. I thought the crest actually looks very Serie A, quite Italian. And the Italians aren't known for their sense of style, really. But in this case, I think it's actually worked out quite well. I really like this crest, and I like the colors as well. I do wonder.
AGR, he once said Italians were not known for their cuisine. So this is his
strengths, but those aren't them.
Yeah.
I wonder with like the crest, it's obviously two colors, half and half, whether we'll get our first half and half CPL kit. Or at least home kit.
I would like a word.
Sorry, yeah. I mean, like, as a primary kind of option, it could be maybe a little bit Barcelona in that respect with the red and blue. So I like that. I liked, Alex mentioned it earlier, but like actually respecting and celebrating the history of soccer in this country. We have a big history. It's all spread out, I know, through multiple time periods and multiple leagues at times, but it does exist. And I think honoring that and showing, respect to that is very important and something that we should do more of. And then I also wanted to say, we talked a bit about, Canada soccer yesterday and the kind of spirit of working in a more collaborative and positive way. And I thought seeing Mauro Biello at the event and very much involved, seeing the messages that were sent from Ismail Kone, Moise Bombito, Max Crepeau, Joe Walterman, Jesse Marsh, that stuff really matters. Like, it makes such a difference to a new club that's starting up to see real kind of figures of authority and credibility like that kind of pitch in and offer their support. So I thought that was great and wanted to mention that as something that I think they'll have really appreciated as well.
Yeah, and I'm happy you mentioned the history thing, because like that's something that's really grinded my gears in the last 10 years of North American sports branding. We've seen it a lot of like whenever a new team comes in, like especially MLS has become really guilty of this with the whole like city name FC thing. And like, I get it. You want to market yourself in a way that teams are recognizable and easy to access. But like, I really think of like St. Louis City, where, they had a USL team that was doing good things, and they completely just kind of wiped that history and went for this really fresh, like very, very corporate feeling team. San Diego FC really did a bad job of this, in my opinion. Like, they had a great thing going on with the San Diego Loyal, a club with that was starting to build history, and they just kind of wiped it out, went for a really generic, like corporate looking thing. And sometimes, I know it's tough with soccer because there's this challenge to pierce the general consciousness, the casuals. But at the same time, when there is history available to you, it makes such a big difference to be able to tap into that sort of history. I think we see it, locally with for me with the Vancouver Whitecaps, the fact that that's a brand, that's a name that's been around for a half century. It matters to people out here. The Whitecaps name means something. So I just love that in Montreal, where they have something like the Supra that was competing in the CSL back in the day, that, I've had people tell me that they were around, in the 80s and 90s when they're playing. Like, I remember watching Supra come to Vancouver or play. It's just cool that they're tapping into that. So that for me is a huge win. And it's nice. Like, a lot of it's hard, like you mentioned, Andy, to mess it up, but I think it's nice and simple. And, sometimes in a world where teams literally love to overcomplicate their branding, that's not a bad thing. And I think it's going to age very nicely. And you're going to have to avoid things like a rebound down the road because you're not doing the most and then realizing, okay, maybe we kind of missed the mark there.
Did you want to say, I thought you were ready to say something there, Ollie, on that. You good?
I agree.
All right. Montreal Supra. Of course, that's the history we're referring to, 1988 to 1992, when they played in the Canadian Soccer League. So bringing that back. But yes, this Supra will be playing out of Laval, and they will kick off in 2026.